Mark is in Seattle. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mike. Mark Taylor-Canfield. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I was going to call to follow up with you on the story that you helped break about the environmentalists in Seattle who were visited by the FBI. But I came upon a breaking story about freedom of the press that I want to share with the truth seekers out there. But by the way, I think that segment where you read the statement by those Seattle activists actually ended up getting posted on the Occupy National Gathering website at natgat2013.org. And that's the event that's happening in Kalamazoo, Michigan, August 21st through the 25th. And I'll actually be conducting a virtual teach-in there about new journalism and freedom of the press. Brings me to this story, which is also from The Stranger, which is the story that broke, the story that you read about the activists in Seattle being investigated by the FBI. This story is actually by their own editor, Dominic Holden, who for a while has been known as a major legalized marijuana activist in Seattle. But he apparently has filed complaints against the Seattle Police Department and the King County Sheriff's Department because of treatment that he got as a reporter when he was trying to cover a story. And apparently he's claiming in this article that one of the police officers actually threatened to visit him at The Stranger where he works to harass him. And so it brings up this whole issue of freedom of the press in the United States. And I just want everyone to realize that according to Reporters Without Borders, the United States has now slipped on their Global Press Freedom Index.
Hey, hold on a second, Mark. I got to take a quick break here. We'll come right back and pick up the conversation. 10 before the hour, back to Mark in Seattle. All right, where were we, Mark?
Hey, Mike, what I was trying to let people know is that as a journalist in the U.S., I have to say that I'm pretty ashamed in terms of press freedom, and that's according to Reporters Without Borders, which is an international advocacy group for journalists around the world. And it actually began in France, but it's spread around the world now. Other countries around the world have more press freedom. That means that journalists are more free to do their job as journalists, and the public in those countries actually has much more immediate access to vital information about their own society. And the reason that Reporters Without Borders cited for this recent drop in U.S. press freedom rating is because of, one, police harassment and arrests of journalists at Occupy Wall Street protests, and two, government surveillance of Associated Press reporters.
Right.
So I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but last year I actually won a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Washington State Patrol because of an incident that took place at demonstrations at the state capitol where I was illegally detained and banned.
Yeah, I think you did mention that, yeah.
So the judge ruled, actually Robert Bryan ruled that the Washington State Patrol had violated my rights as a journalist while I was covering the sit-in protest. And from that point on, the state can no longer illegally detain or ban people from the Capitol by threatening to arrest them for trespass, which is the way they keep people away from the protest.
And since you won that lawsuit, all that is stopped, right, Mark?
At the state capitol, they can't do it, but here in Seattle, what we had was a situation where Dominic Holden, who's one of the editors of The Stranger magazine, was trying to cover a story, some police action that he came upon in downtown Seattle, and he ended up feeling that he was threatened, and he was, no, it hasn't, and that's one of the reasons why I brought that up, is because Reporters Without Borders, has been reporting on stories all over the world, from Nepal to Syria, terrible things happen. There is no press freedom, but to see the United States slip from, maybe in the top 20 within the last couple of years should really be a concern for everyone in the country.
Yeah, I think so too. And the political and religious right in this country, though, has spent at least the past 30 years rephrase the liberal media. It's spelled L-I-B-R-U-L, the liberal media. And in that process, I think the country has lost a key element that is necessary for a functioning democracy, and that's an activist press. Now, I'm not saying that the press hasn't brought a lot of it on itself in refusing to cover article or issues that are critical to the continuation of this experiment in democracy, because a lot of so-called press have dropped the ball on that. But it's amazing to me how people are so quick to demonize the press. I'm not talking about this crap on television. I'm talking about the print medium, which is which is the bedrock. That's what they were talking about in the First Amendment. It's the bedrock of trying to keep people honest and making sure that this experiment continues. And it's being assaulted, as you point out, in terms of press freedom. That's something that should make Americans, first of all, ashamed.
Well, apparently the First Amendment, is no longer in effect when, specifically the issue that I'm referring to in a lot of these cases is reporters that are trying to cover police activity, whether it's a protest or an arrest on the street, and they're told that they will be arrested. And I'm sure folks listening to this program have heard these stories all around the country, where they're threatened with arrest if they take photographs.
Right.
They're threatened with arrest for usually something like obstruction if they ask questions. And I just wanted to remind folks in Seattle that when Chief Kurlikowski was here, before he became Obama's national drug czar, he was forced to send out an official memo that stated that Seattle police officers must not harass or arrest people for asking questions, observing an arrest, or taking photos. And he even advised the cops to ignore any insulting remarks, profanity, or negative gestures directed at them by bystanders. So I assume that, that was a statement that Kurlikowski had to make because of the many lawsuits that had been filed against SPD officers up to that point. In other words, the police misconduct was costing the city a lot of money. But here in Seattle, apparently even after 8 months of a Department of Justice review and a federal court oversight of the police department right now, and numerous expensive lawsuits, some officers just still refuse to follow their own official department policies, which is you do not harass people for asking, reasonable questions. And the police department has actually had to admit that the questions that were asked by the reporter Dominic Holden were reasonable questions, and he wasn't trying to harass anyone. He didn't come across as threatening.
Well, I think we can agree, and Mark, I appreciate you checking in, but I think we can all pretty much agree. I'm an observer, like a lot of people, and I try to be as active as I can, but primarily an observer, and that's the sense that I get. Mark, thanks for checking in. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Okay? Take care. Keep it lit. I'm Mike Malloy.